So today, as I'm doing this Saturday, I get a call from an old pal, a brother from another mother. You might know him as Gregory Manarino. It's been a while since we chatted, by the way. But I see the phone ring. Hey, it's my pal Greg, man. Greg, baby, what's up? We had a nice little conversation, bond market, cryptos, the stock market, like just stuff. Greg is a smart guy. I don't know if you guys know that. Greg is one smart dude. But we had a nice lengthy conversation, and then we hung up, and he called me back later. He's like, "Oh, I want to add one more thing, you know." We started chatting again. Good times. But one of the things we kind of talked about a little bit in that conversation was something here from Wolf. Not that I got this from Wolf Street at the time, but now that I'm seeing it, I'm like, you know what, I probably should do a video about it. You know, Greg's even talking about this stuff, of course. You know, he's on top of things. Wolfstreet.com, $1.3 trillion leveraged loan becomes unglued. This is one of many things we were talking about, all these problems, and one of the things he was concerned with was like, you know, Joe, man, every sign I'm looking at, the inverted yield curve, like all this, oh my God, like if something doesn't happen soon with, you know, like basically with Trump and doing something about these people, he's like, I kind of, man, I feel like, you know, they're about to let loose on the economy on all of us. They're going to take the middle class down. And I'm like, well, we know that's their plan. That's the club's plan. I said, but we got Donald in there. I believe, I said, I typically wouldn't say this. I'd be right there with you. Like, oh my gosh. But I think this is going to be a little different this time because we got a good guy in there finally who's doing something, and they keep talking about January. Hey, Q says, you know, when does the Senate take over again, the new Senate? Oh, that's right, January 3rd. When does the executive order? Oh, that's right, January 1st. So I said, you know, because of that, I feel like, you know, maybe this crashing that we might be expecting may not be either you know, to the extent that we'll see it, or at all, maybe just a little dip, kind of more of a dip, I guess. I don't know, but we just had a nice little conversation. We're throwing things back and forth. But there is so much more money out there and debt out there that you and I don't even have a clue of. Well, $21 trillion in debt. And I was like, by the way, have you heard about the 21 trillion missing from the DOD, the Department of Defense, the Army, Office of the Army is missing 6.5 trillion. They can't account for it. They have a $122 billion budget. Where does 6.5 billion? Well, they try to explain it. You know, well, we have to move stuff off book to on book, and the property values, and right, we have 6.5 trillion of unaccountable. You know, so that's another thing. And then you got he was just talking about the derivatives. He goes, for every derivative, there's like another derivative on top of that derivative. And these are just bets on some other asset, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous. The Fed has warned about them, and investors fear a run on the fund. The $1.3 trillion leveraged loan boom is coming unglued, not because the junk-rated, highly leveraged, cash flow negative companies that issued these loans are massively defaulting. They're not yet. But because investors are fleeing these instruments that have been super hot for years, well, until October. They're fleeing from loan mutual funds that hold these loans because they want to grab the first mover advantage in an illiquid market. They want to be the first out the door before they get caught in a run on the fund with potentially catastrophic consequences for their cherished money. These investors yanked a net of $3 billion out of U.S. loan mutual funds and $300 million out of exchange traded loan funds during the week ended December 19th. In the total, not in the, but in total, $3.3 billion, the biggest outflow on record, hint, hint, according to Lipper. In the prior week, investors had yanked out $2.5 billion, which at the time was a record. So it's almost 50% higher. New record, $3.3 billion. It was the 5th week in a row of net outflows exceeding $1 billion and also a record. Since the week ended October 31st, the week all this started, the net outflow has reached $11.3 billion. Loan mutual funds sit on some cash with which to meet redemptions, I think it's supposed to be redemptions, because selling a loan to meet redemptions can take a long time, even if good, for in the good times. But investors can get out of a mutual fund with the click of a mouse. This liquidity mismatch is very risky. When redemptions pick up momentum, the fund becomes a forced seller into an illiquid market where only a few vulture hedge funds, set up precisely for that opportunity, are willing to buy at cents on the dollar, even if the loans have not yet defaulted. Forced selling, the associated losses, and the inability still to meet redemptions can cause open-end mutual funds, such as these loan funds, to collapse. Now, these funds are flooded with record redemptions, and they're selling loans to stay ahead of redemptions and maintain a cash cushion in order to avoid the fate that afflicted a number of open-end bond mutual funds during the financial crisis and during the oil bust a couple of years ago. A collapse of the fund when there is a run on the fund. This selling by mutual funds has caused prices of these loans to drop. Note that leveraged loans carry a floating interest rate pegged to LIBOR. And by the way, I'm sure you've probably heard of 1,000 times now. Oh, they rig the LIBOR rates, the banks, they rig this, they rig that, they're rigging everything. They caught. Another thing me and Greg talked about, and they get a little slap on the wrist. No one gets in trouble. Pay your effing little fine and go about your business. And then they go right back to rigging the market again. However, carrying a floating interest rate pegged to LIBOR in a rising interest rate environment, the interest that a leveraged loan pays rises with LIBOR. So in this environment, these loans maintain their value, unlike fixed rate bonds, whose prices decline as yields rise. That's why these leveraged loans have become so hot among investors over the past 3 years. But on October the 22nd, this market peaked, and then it began to fall apart. The S&P/LSTA US Leveraged Loan 100 Index, which tracks the prices of the biggest and most liquid loans, has dropped 4.3% since then. That might not sound like a lot compared to the declines in the stock market, but these loans are investments with a fixed face value and rising interest payments, and their price is not supposed to drop unless they're at risk of a freaking default. These 8 weeks of prior declines wiped out the price gains of the prior 11 months, putting the index back where it had been on November 30th, 2017, and the wave of defaults hasn't even started yet. The Fed has warned and fretted about leveraged loans with increasing intensity since 2014, broadsiding them in ever greater detail and emphasis, including most recently these two things on October 24th, when the market peaked, with a very specific warning about how companies that issued leveraged loans are dousing investors with risks via 4 tactics: cov-light leveraged loans, incremental facilities, EBITDA or EBITDA add-backs, and collateral stripping. And the second thing on December 2nd, in its first ever financial stability report, in which the Fed fingered business debts as the potential source of the next financial crisis, with leveraged loans being specifically cited as one of the major risks in that group. Until October 22nd, investors have brushed off any concerns, and since 2014, when the Fed started warning about them, leveraged loans outstanding have doubled to 1.3, again, we're not talking billions, trillion, $1.3 trillion. A lot of times, leveraged loans are issued to fund leveraged buyouts, or LBOs, where the acquirer, usually a private equity firm, makes the acquired company borrow the money to fund its own buyout, hence leveraged buyout. And the other thing, special dividends by the acquired company back to its PE firm owners. This form of asset stripping is called, ironically, recapitalization. Leveraged loans are traded like securities, but securities regulators don't regulate them because they're loans. But these effing regulators want to get into crypto, and that's a security, and that might be a security. I think that's a security. It's kind of a security. Since you were peddling securities, we're going to do this for you. But these leveraged loans to the tune of $1.3 trillion, which is a drop of sand, the crypto market's a drop of sand in a bucket. We got those we think they're securities, we're going to keep them called securities. But these, which are absolutely securities, but since the word loans attached to them, they're not securities. Bank regulators consider leveraged loans too risky for banks to keep on their balance sheet. So banks arrange them with other leveraged loans, structure them, package them into collateralized loan obligations, or CLOs, and sell them to institutional investors or they sell the loans to loan mutual funds, pension funds, and other institutional investors, domestic or foreign. And all along, they collect hefty fees. Thus, most of the risk of leveraged loans are with investors, not the banks. But banks are exposed to some extent, particularly when the market changes and suddenly they cannot offload the loans and are stuck with them, which happened during the financial crisis, or when they cannot offload them at the prices envisioned and then have to sell them at big discounts and better terms for investors. And this is happening now. Rather than take a loss of this type, some banks are now choosing to hang on to the loans, hoping for better days. Is that kind of like you when, 2008-ish, 5, 6, 7, 8, hey, I'm going to buy a second house, we're going to flip it, get an adjustable rate mortgage. Yeah, don't worry about it because we're just going to flip it. And I'm referring to the part where it said they package them to collateral loan obligations and sell them to institutional investors. Wait a minute. Bank regulators consider leveraged loans too risky for banks to keep on their balance sheet, so banks arrange them with other leveraged loans, structure them, package them into collateral. Remember, they packaged our loans together, the mortgages. Remember that? They packaged them together, even the complete trash mortgages, stuck them in with a few good AAA rated stuff, and called the whole bundle AAA rated. But upon further inspection, there were mortgages in there that weren't even kind of AAA rated. Mortgage-backed securities, MBS. Mortgage-backed securities, collateralized debt, collateralized loan obligation. They just make these words up. I'm telling you, they just make these words up, and then they the new product to sell. Got a new product, guys. New derivative product. It's going to be great. You're going to love this. We're going to collect hefty fees. The whole thing's going to implode. And it doesn't matter because we collected fees the whole time. We collected them when the thing's going up, when they're going down, when they collapse, we collect fees. It's a brilliant thing. Oh, and if we get in trouble, we just pay a little fine. Pay a little fine with the massive gains we made, and we're off the hook. It's a wonderful thing. It's the most wonderful time of the year. If you're a bankster. And that time of the year is every time of the year. Every day of the year, by the way. According to Bloomberg, a group of banks led by Goldman Sachs had to hold on to a $500 million loan backing the acquisition by First Reserve, a private equity firm, of a stake in Blue Racer Midstream LLC, a pipeline operator. People familiar with the matter said a mix of direct lenders and infrastructure funds have expressed interest in the debt, and Goldman is now likely to sell the loan to a small group of buyers separate from the syndicated market, one of the sources said. Barclays and RBC are also involved. Oh, I'm sure they are. It's like chum in the water. The sharks come around. The delayed transaction combined with others means the banks will have to bear the risk of the loan prices falling further, as well as costs associated with holding the debt on their balance sheet. This will be another cold shower for earnings at the biggest banks that arrange leveraged loans. But investors will eat the lion's share of the losses. And to avoid this fate, these investors are now selling. There is always someone on the other side of each and every sale. And in this manner, the risks are getting shuffled around. And each time they get shuffled around, the prices drop. But these are still the good times. The economy is growing and companies are not yet massively defaulting on these loans. Credit is tightening, and it will be harder and more expensive for junk-related companies to refinance existing debts when they come due. And a wave of defaults is expected, but hasn't happened yet. And the impact of those defaults on leveraged loans is scheduled for later. What we're seeing now is investors getting cold feet. That is the first step. Under tremendous pressure, the Fed sticks to its guns, mostly, and the crybabies are having a cow. Read stocks tank 3% in 2 hours after the Fed refuses to flip-flop. Another article of theirs at Wolf Street. So, yeah, I guess it doesn't look like anything's really changing these days, is it? Banks doing what the banks do, and Snippy reading and catching these things and doing what he does to try to tell people what the hell's going on around here. And again, what asset class of 2018 isn't down? From cryptos to the stocks, different types of stocks, whatever, the bank stocks, the equities, you name it. Bond market trouble, is there a safe place anywhere to put your money? Again, I would rather control my own destiny with my own money and my own investments than leave it with one of these sharks who take a fee, scrape a fee, and then I found out later on they put my investment into the worst possible pile of crap you could think of while simultaneously taking massive fees from me and other people, because they're the smart investment company. And there's nothing I could do. You can't sue them, can't do anything because you've relinquished your right to do anything. You've given them the power to invest for you. They're the smart guy. You're the dummy. Let them do it. They're the experts. I'd rather be the quote-unquote dummy and take my own life in my own hand financially, which is why I've never had a 401k, never invested in the stock market. My investments are precious metals, which in this case, silver. I love silver more than gold. And cryptos. And I'm going to wait patiently and watch the rest of the system just have its little issues, wait for the next bull market in cryptos, and boom. Take care.